The wind rolled low across the ravine, curling dust along jagged rock as the survey drone dipped into the canyon below. Its scanner pulsed a steady red beat, casting narrow bands of light across fractured stone and time-worn debris. Benson adjusted the strap of his pack and checked the display on his datapad. Topography matched the anomaly's last known coordinates. The signal from command had been patchy all morning, but that wasn't unusual. What was unusual were the repeated warnings. In the old geological logs, flagged decades ago and never followed up. Unstable ground, unexplored vaults, broken tech buried in half-mapped terrain. Still think this is a good idea? Lillian's voice cut through the static in his earpiece. Low and clipped. Benson glanced at her as she crouched ahead of him. Golden fur dusted with chalky soil. Her ears twitched at the hum of the drone, but her posture was calm, practiced. She moved like water over broken earth, smooth and precise. Tribal tattoos coiled down her arms in faint red swirls, pulsing ever so slightly in the heat. Her tail flicked once, a subtle tell of unease. "Nope," Benson said with a half-smile. "But command said they wanted confirmation, and here we are." Lillian didn't respond. Instead, she sniffed the air and stepped lightly over a fallen slab, eyes scanning every crevice. Her people didn't need scanners to sense danger. They read it in scent shifts, in how the wind curved around dead things. She froze suddenly, crouching beside a stretch of stone etched with strange, time-worn carvings. Benson moved beside her, knelt, and frowned. The glyphs weren't just decorative, they spiraled inward like circuitry, almost mechanical. The drone beeped erratically, its path looping as if confused by a false echo. Then the ground groaned beneath them. Benson looked up just as the drone spun out of sight. He shouted something, maybe her name, but then the earth cracked loud and sharp beneath his boots. The world tilted. The floor gave out. He didn't remember the fall. Only flashes, stone giving way, gravity pulling like a fist around his spine, the cold slap of air rushing past. Then pain. Impact. Black. He came to in darkness, air thick with dust and the wet mineral scent of deep earth. Every breath scraped his throat. Light shimmered faintly from the wall's moss, bioluminescent, casting green ripples across slick stone. His side ached, ribs protesting, but nothing was broken. A low groan came from nearby. He crawled toward the sound, blinking grit from his eyes. Lillian lay crumpled beside a wall, her cloak torn at the shoulder, one leg bent wrong beneath her. Blood had matted the fur around her knee, dark and sluggish. "Hey," he said, voice hoarse. "You with me?" She nodded, jaw clenched. Legs out, dislocated. Benson didn't wait. He braced her thigh with one arm, gripped her shin with the other, and snapped the joint back into place with a harsh crack. Lillian hissed, fangs bared, but didn't scream. She gripped his arm until the tremor passed, then pushed his hand away and breathed through her teeth. "Thanks," she muttered, her voice tight. He helped her lean against the wall, checked her over. Her eyes were wide but sharp. No concussion. Just shock and pain. Then she looked at him, really looked, and something in her face shifted. "Benson," she said slowly, "you need to know, this cave, this heat, it's triggering my cycle." He froze. "The heat cycle?" he asked. Though he already knew the answer, she nodded, eyes narrowing. "If we don't get out of here fast, I might not be myself." The air pressed against them like wet cloth, thick and alive. Lillian's breathing came sharp through her nose as she leaned against the stone wall, fur damp, tattoos along her arms pulsing with faint red light. Benson crouched a few feet away, scanning the moss-covered floor with his broken datapad. No signal, no route out. Only echoes, some mechanical, some too fluid to be stone. The cave wasn't silent anymore. It was listening. How fast does the cycle escalate? Benson asked. Quietly, not looking at her. Depends on heat, stress, proximity. Her voice was rougher now, almost frayed. But this place was built to push it. I can smell it. Spores. Engineered hormones. It's not natural. Benson frowned. You mean the cave is accelerating it on purpose? It's a breeding trap, she growled. An old one. We were warned about places like this in training. Sacred chambers from before memory meant to force pair bonding between elite scouts. Designed to isolate, stimulate, overwhelm. No exit until the bond is complete ... or one doesn't survive. He felt a chill slide down his spine despite the heat. And you just remembered that now? I didn't recognize the architecture until we fell in deeper, she snapped, then winced. It's not like they give us a tourist map. These places were buried, forgotten ... on purpose. Benson turned back toward her, lips tight. And now we're test subjects. Lillian didn't answer. Instead, she slid down the wall slowly, hands shaking as she pulled her knees in. Her claws scraped the stone, leaving shallow lines. Her pupils were too wide. Sweat clung to the curve of her neck. Her voice, when it came again, was quieter, like it was borrowed from somewhere deeper than her throat. My body's already reacting. My mind knows better, but the instincts are wired to override. I need control. You need distance. I'm not leaving you, Benson said. Flat, solid, UNMOVING. She looked up at him then, not pleading, not weak, but terrified. Not of him, of herself. If I break, she said, don't fight me. Just restrain me. Do not let me win. He nodded. Once. Not a promise, not an agreement, just understanding. Then he stood and scanned the walls. Steam poured from slits between stones, pooling against the ceiling in lazy coils. It wasn't rising naturally. The air pulsed every few seconds like breath. He walked to one of the vents and crouched, pressing a palm to the rock. Heat cycles. Pheromone triggers, pressurized air. His voice was low. This place isn't collapsing. It's alive. It's running a sequence. Like a ritual, Lillian muttered. He turned to her. If it has a pattern, we can break it. You think we can hack a temple built to break minds? She said, a bitter laugh crawling up her throat. I think if we do nothing, we lose. And I don't plan on watching you lose yourself just because someone long dead wanted to play God with your biology. She blinked. Her tail flicked. The glow in her tattoos dimmed for a moment, not because the cycle stopped, but because something else had cut through the noise. Hope. Together, they searched the chamber. Benson used what remained of his tools to chart airflow. Lillian, struggling to stay focused, used her nose, her instincts, to detect scent patterns embedded in the stone. They discovered narrow side vents behind a collapsed panel funnels that pulled in cold air from deeper parts of the cave. Vents that might not be active ... yet. We need to redirect the heat, Benson said. Lower the chamber temperature. Reduce the pheromone saturation, buy you time. It's already in my blood, Lillian whispered, shaking. But ... if we can slow the next phase ... maybe. Maybe's enough, he replied. For now. They built makeshift barriers from broken plating, pack casings, and debris. It wasn't perfect, but it choked some of the flow. The chamber groaned in response, like something inside didn't like being defied. Lillian collapsed again near the far wall, hands pressed to her temples. It's still climbing, she breathed, slower but stronger. Benson crouched beside her, not touching. Then we move. Find the next chamber. Maybe it has an exit or a control node. She forced herself to her feet. Her body trembled. Not from fear, but from something deeper, chemical, primal. Her lips were dry. her voice quieter. If it gets worse in there, then I'll remind you who you are, he said. She looked at him, not as prey, not as protector, but as anchor. She nodded once, then limped forward into the tunnel ahead. The walls narrowed. The air grew slick. Somewhere deep within, the cave pulsed again. Not breath this time. Heartbeat. And it was speeding up. The tunnel curved downward in a slow spiral, carved not by erosion but by deliberate, ancient hands or something like hands. Faint grooves followed the edges of the stone, each line etched with eerie precision, too smooth, too perfect. They glowed faintly now, reacting to the heat of their breath, the pulse of their movement. Lillian's footsteps were uneven, but she didn't stumble. She didn't speak either. Her silence was no longer a choice. It was a battle. Benson followed close behind, one hand on the wall to steady himself, the other resting near his belt where his sidearm waited, useless in a place like this, but comforting nonetheless. Air was humid and carried a pulse now, not mechanical, not natural, something in between. Like a system that had forgotten its origin but remembered its function. After 20 meters, the corridor opened suddenly into a chamber unlike the others, taller, more intricate, with an arching ceiling that looked like a rib cage carved from onyx. Veins of gold-colored crystal ran through the walls, pulsing with slow, rhythmic light. The floor was made of interlocking plates, some bearing the same spiral markings from before. A low mist hovered just above the ground, swirling around there. Boots. Benson exhaled slowly. This isn't a natural chamber. No, Lillian whispered. Her voice was distant, almost foreign. This is the heart of it. He turned. Her tattoos were glowing again, brighter this time, not just red but edged in violet, as if reacting to something buried deep in the stone. Her breath was shallow, chest rising too fast. She clutched her arm with one clawed hand, fingers digging into the fur like she was trying to anchor herself to her own body. How bad? He asked. She shook her head. It's past containment. I can't filter it out anymore. This place is pressing into me like it wants me to surrender. Benson took a step closer. She didn't back away, but her eyes were wide, dilated, her tail stiff behind her. Her jaw was clenched so tight he thought she might break her own teeth. You're still here, he said calmly. I see you. Her lips parted, a breath, a tremble. I don't know how long that'll last, she admitted. He nodded. Then let's move, fast, before this place tries to rewrite either of us. They crossed the chamber carefully, avoiding certain plates that gave off more heat than the others. Lillian's steps became more hesitant with each meter, her instincts pulling at her like invisible chains. Her claws flexed and unflexed. Her scent had shifted again, no longer just heat. There was pain in it now, restraint, desperation. At the far end of the chamber, a new passage opened, but something blocked the way, a mechanism. A gate of intertwined roots and tech metal, fused together like a grown lock. In the center, a panel, not digital, not touch-sensitive, but alive. It pulsed with light when Benson neared it. Organic code, he muttered. Farrelly biotech? It's a trial lock, Lillian said, voice barely above a whisper. Requires ... harmony. Meaning? It only opens if the system detects compatible intent, sensed breath, sensed choice. Benson turned to her. So, a lie detector that reads our nervous systems? Basically. She sank to one knee, body trembling violently now, and I can't stabilize. The closer we get, the more it pulls. Benson dropped beside her. Then we trick it. You can't fake harmony, she hissed. You have to feel it. He placed his hand over hers. Her claws twitched but didn't scratch. Then trust me, he said. Not your cycle. Not your fear. Just me. She blinked. her gaze locked onto his. The mist around them pulsed like breath held in anticipation. Slowly he guided her hand toward the panel. It brightened. Pulsed once, twice, then dimmed. Sink, he whispered. Follow my breath. They inhaled together, slow, long. Her body shook. Heat surged through her muscles. But she matched his rhythm. She closed her eyes. His hand over hers kept her grounded. Again. The panel responded. Light spilled from the seams of the gate. Again. Lillian single quotes S jaw clenched. Fangs bared, but she didn't break. Again. And the lock clicked. The gate unraveled like vines under fire, curling away to reveal a passage descending deeper still. Cool air. Wafted out clean, untouched by cycle triggers. Lillian collapsed forward, breathing hard, tears streaking her fur. Benson caught her. She didn't resist. You passed, he whispered. We passed, she muttered, barely. The system hadn't just tested them for access. It had measured them for connection. They didn't win through force. They won through rhythm, through trust. And something behind the wall had watched. The passage down was narrow and breathing. Not in the metaphorical way Benson would have preferred it, literally breathed. The walls pulsed with faint suction and release, slow and steady, like the cave was exhaling around them. Steam hissed. From vents hidden in the stone, curling along the floor like the ghost of something that used to be alive. And beneath all of that, the sound, not quite a hum, not quite a growl. It resonated low and deep, just outside of hearing but inside. The bones, like a pressure headache born from ancient machinery. Lillian walked ahead of him now. He didn't ask why, he knew. Her instincts were sharper than his tech. Even in her fragile state, her senses could trace temperature differentials in the air, scent hormonal shifts in the dust, and feel vibration changes through her footpads, but he didn't like the way she moved now. Her steps were quieter. Not the confident, practiced silence of a trained scout, but something more primal. Her posture was lower, tail stiff, ears back, claws slightly unsheathed. She hadn't spoken in 10 minutes. And when she finally did, it wasn't a warning, it was a whisper. We're not alone anymore. Benson slowed. His hand hovered over his weapon, but didn't draw. You hear something? No, she said. I feel it. Something else is in here. Something watching. Animal? Her. Head turned slightly. Not animal. Not like us. It doesn't hunt with hunger. It waits with permission, like it thinks I'll come willingly. A chill ran down his back. They reached the bottom of the tunnel, where it spilled into a wider dome-shaped chamber. It was damp, rimmed with deep cracks filled with black moss. Glyphs were carved into the walls here, thousands of them spinning in chaotic patterns. They didn't flow like language. They pulsed like thought. And at the center of the room lay bones. Not one body. Dozens, maybe hundreds, some small. Some massive. Some UNIDENTIVLE. Benson stepped closer and crouched. The remains were old centuries, maybe more, but some were fresher. Maybe a few years. Broken claws, shattered cuffs. Ceremonial masks with fractures across the brows. Symbols of failure. These were cycles that went wrong, Lillian said quietly behind him. This was the trial chamber. No, she corrected. This was the failure pit. Before he could respond, a new sound echoed from one of the adjoining. Tunnels. Soft. Clawed. And purposeful. Benson rose slowly, sidearm in hand now. The shadows ahead twisted. Something moved, and then it stepped into view. It was Farrelly, but not like Lillian. Taller, leaner, more angular. Its eyes were yellow with no pupils. Its fur patchy, oily, and clotted with something dark. Around its neck, a shattered mating collar rusted shut. Its claws were cracked from overuse, its breathing labored, but the worst part was its smile. A wide, broken, toothy grin stretched too far across its muzzle. And it stared directly at Lillian, finally. It rasped, voice dry and wrong. A real female, unbonded, burning. Lillian flinched. The creature tilted its head. "Don't be afraid," it said, stepping forward. "I know what you need. I've felt it. Let go. Let the heat in. The chamber will do the rest." "Step back," Benson said, weapon raised. Exile didn't even look at him. "Humans can't help you here," it muttered. "They're not built for the bond. They don't understand what we are, what we were." Lillian's hands trembled at her sides. "I'm warning you," Benson growled, stepping between them. The exile snarled. "She's not yours. She's hers," Benson said coldly. "And she doesn't want you." The creature lunged. Benson fired. The bolt hit its shoulder, staggering it sideways, but it didn't fall. It was fast, far faster than something its size should have been. It spun off the wall and lunged again, only this time Lillian met it midair with a snarl of her own. They collided in a blur of fur and claws. She was still weak, still fighting the cycle, but she didn't hold back now. Something in her snapped past the restraint and found purpose. Not surrender, but fury. She raked her claws across the exile's chest, ducked its lunge, and pivoted off the wall with a feral elegance that reminded Benson exactly who she was. Beneath all that chemical pressure, the fight didn't last long. She crushed its throat beneath her knee, and when it lay still, she staggered back, panting, knees shaking. Benson caught her before she hit the ground. Her body was slick with sweat. Her tattoos glowed dangerously bright. Her eyes flicked toward his, but this time not with confusion or fear. "Something else. Clarity. Double quotes. There are more," she gasped. "I can smell them." Benson nodded grimly. "Exiles, rogues, failed cycles. Some who gave in, some who never came back. This temple didn't kill them, it twisted them." He stared down at the corpse. Its expression had shifted in death. Not anger. Not rage. Relief. Benson looked at Lillian. "We need to get out of this level. Now." She nodded, and this time she took his hand. Not because she was slipping, because she chose. The corridor narrowed behind them, sealing off the death they left behind with the hiss of damp air and the stench of ancient failure. The body of the exile faded into shadow as the stones folded back into place, as if the chamber itself had exhaled content to devour another memory. Benson's hand still gripped Lillian's as they pressed forward, not running, not wandering, but walking with that quiet urgency that only those who've survived something feral can muster. They didn't speak. Not at first. The air was cooler. Now, not by much, but enough for Lillian to take deeper breaths without shuddering. Her fur still glistened from the fight blood, sweat, heat, all of it clinging to her like a second skin. Her tattoos had dulled slightly, fading from their fevered glow into something calmer, steadier. But Benson didn't miss the subtle tremors in her tail, the way her ears stayed half flat, alert to sounds that hadn't yet arrived. The tunnel widened again after 30 paces and opened into a vast domed chamber, its ceiling lost in darkness. Above, at the center, stood a platform. Raised, circular, carved with spiraling patterns so intricate they looked like veins. And the moment they stepped inside, the temperature shifted. Not hotter. Not colder. Aligned. It was as if the room had scanned them the moment they crossed the threshold and adjusted itself to the exact hormonal and emotional frequency of their presence. The stone beneath their feet pulsed softly with light amber, red, violet, all hues that matched Lillian's skin, her tattoos, the tones of her heat cycle. But they didn't press on her this time. They didn't trigger her. They waited. Lillian stopped short. Her eyes narrowed. "This is the bonding nexus," she whispered. Benson looked at her. What's that? Where the trials end, where the choice happens, where the system decides if you're worthy of the bond or just another accident. He looked up at the platform. So this is the final test? No, she said, stepping forward slowly. This is where you choose the final test. He followed her to the base of the structure. Glyphs moved along the floor in circular motions, rearranging themselves beneath their feet. Benson could see how the stone responded to her scent, to the biosignatures in her sweat, her heat. This was no temple. It was a machine, and they were inside it. Lillian stood at the center now, eyes wide, breathing steady. This was where our ancestors surrendered, she said. If the cycle had taken you too far and you couldn't resist anymore, this is where you let it consume you. And if you didn't, if you still had yourself, you were offered the chamber below. What's below? Benson asked. Release, reset, silence. She turned slowly to face him. It wipes the hormonal imprint, breaks the cycle. But it also severs all potential. If you reject the bond here, there's no going back. Your body never allows it again. Benson felt a strange weight in his chest. You're saying? This place gives you one final chance to either give in or let it go forever. She nodded, and neither choice is easy. Benson approached slowly. The closer he got, the brighter the platform glowed. Lillian's tattoos reacted in kind, pulsing in harmony with the floor. He could feel it too, not heat, not scent, but pressure. The cave didn't just want them to decide. It wanted to know what kind of people they were. And then the wall behind them shifted, not open. Revealed. A set of doors emerged, previously invisible, now pulsing with blue-white light. But in front of them stood another fairy figure, not an exile, not a predator. This one stood tall, still, and armored in ceremonial garb, though it had long since begun to decay. Its body was skeletal beneath the robes, its claws sheathed, hands folded over a staff embedded with what looked like a heartstone, dead now, blackened from time. Lillian gasped. That's a gatekeeper, Benson frowned. A what? Chosen scout who made it through the trial, but refused to bond. They stay. Not alive. Not dead. Just presence. Guardians of the path forward. The gatekeeper didn't move, but a sound echoed from the far side of the room. Another door. Opening. And from that hallway came a voice. Not a voice made from lungs or mouths. Voice made of stone and memory and ancient code. State your choice. Lillian stepped back. It's speaking to me. You have reached the core. Cycle integrity at 82%. Control threshold, thin. State your choice, bond or release. Her breathing turned ragged. Her claws dug into her palms. Benson stepped beside her. You don't have to choose now. Yes, she said. I do. She turned to face him. Her eyes burned, not with desire, not with instinct, but with everything she'd been holding back. This place was built to break me, to push me into surrender, to burn my body so hot I couldn't think. But I fought more clearly down here than I ever did on the surface, because you were with me. Lillian, you didn't run. You didn't take. You didn't dominate. And every time I came close to falling, you stood still. And that's why I can make this choice. She turned back to the platform. State your choice. Lillian's voice was quiet, but it didn't tremble. I choose neither. The chamber paused. The lights froze. And then something deeper than sound shuddered through the walls. Benson tensed. What did you just do? She looked at him and smiled, not with peace, but with fury. I rejected the binary. The platform shattered. Not with violence, but with release. Stone folded into itself. Heat drained upward through unseen vents. The glyphs scattered into dust. The gatekeeper's staff crumbled in its hands. And then the door behind it slid open not as a test, but as an exit. Lillian stumbled. Benson caught her. The chamber no longer pulsed. It no longer watched. It let go. They stood together, surrounded by silence. For the first time in hours. No pressure. No expectation. Just choice. The door didn't open with ceremony. No blast of light. No grand declaration of triumph. It simply parted, quiet, slow, deliberate. As if a temple had exhaled its final breath and accepted that it had failed to bend them, or perhaps that it had succeeded in something deeper. Benson held Lillian by the elbow, steadying her as the last echoes faded into the stone. She was breathing easier now, her shoulders no longer trembling under invisible weight. But her eyes, they still burned with something raw, not adrenaline, not instinct. Something clearer. They stepped through the threshold together. On the other side, the air changed completely. The oppressive heat lifted like a curtain drawn back. Gone were the pheromone-soaked walls and pulse-triggered glyphs. The tunnel beyond was dim but cool, dry. The silence wasn't hostile anymore. Was clean, sacred. This place wasn't meant to push. It was meant to listen. The stone under their feet had changed too. It gleamed faintly in the low light like obsidian polished by time and purpose. Veins of pale blue shimmered in patterns too complex to follow, like star maps drawn by hands that had never seen a sun. And at the far end, a single structure stood embedded in the wall. A console, not a weapon. Not a prison key. A choice. Benson approached it cautiously. Lillian followed, her breathing steady but deep, like she was inhaling freedom for the first time. The console pulsed once, then flared gently to life. A sphere rose from its center, levitating, casting soft patterns across their faces. It spoke in the same voice that had echoed in the chamber before, but now it sounded different, like it wasn't reading her biology anymore. It was reading her. Well, you have resisted ritual. You have overridden instinct. You have preserved identity within cycle. Your trial is complete. Lillian's hand clenched at her side. Final option. Nullify bond protocol and exit without consequence. Confirm? She didn't answer. Not right away. Benson looked at her. This is it, he said quietly. You can break the system. Walk out clean. She nodded slowly. But do you want to? He asked. Her throat moved. It's not about want. It's about who I am on the other side of this. She stepped forward, claws brushing the console. I was trained to believe the cycle defined my worth. If you gave in, you were weak. If you bonded, you were dependent. If you resisted, you were broken. Her voice didn't shake, but that's a lie. Because none of those choices mean anything unless they're made with full clarity. Unless they're mine. She turned to Benson. And if I walk away now, not because I'm afraid, but because I choose to, then I reclaim everything the cycle ever tried to steal from me. He nodded. So do it. She reached forward and placed her hand on the sphere. Bond protocol nullified. Cycle imprint erased. Hormonal override dismantled. A soft tone chimed. And just like that, it was over. The lights dimmed. The floor stilled. And somewhere deep in the walls, the mechanisms that had once monitored every heartbeat shut down. But the door behind the console didn't open immediately. Instead, the walls lit one more time, just once. A corridor extended beyond the console. Not a tunnel back to the surface. But deeper. Benson frowned. More? Lillian stepped beside him. Not a trial. He looked at her. Then what? A library. They walked. No longer with fear. No longer as prey. The corridor opened into a chamber unlike anything they'd seen, vast, cathedral-like, with crystals hanging like frozen lightning from the ceiling. And in the center of the room stood pedestals, dozens of them, each holding record scrolls, spheres, glowing tablets written in languages that felt like music made solid. A memory vault, not of failure, but of resistance. They stepped toward the nearest pedestal, and as they approached, it lit. Holographic images swirled in the air, faces, rituals, moments frozen in time. Fairy warriors alone in chambers, human explorers standing beside them. Mixed pairings, broken cycles, reclaimed selves. This place wasn't the end of the trial. It was the record of every soul who had refused to become something they weren't. Lillian stared at the images for a long time. Her breath hitched. "They never told us this place existed," she whispered. Benson looked around. "Because it proves the system was never flawless. It proves people like me weren't failures," she said. "We were survivors." A soft sound echoed behind them. A new door. And beyond it, a ramp. Upward. Sunlight. Thin. Cold. Real. Benson turned to her. His voice low. "You ready?" She took his hand, not because she needed him, but because she wanted him beside her. "Not as a bonded pair," she said. "Not as instinct's prisoners." He smiled. "As equals." She finished. They walked into the light and left the temple behind, not broken, not burned, but whole. The sunlight didn't welcome them with warmth. It was pale, thin, the kind of light that filtered through high canyon mist and morning silence, touching everything but warming nothing. Yet to Benson and Lillian, it felt holy. Not because of the light itself, but because it wasn't engineered. It wasn't part of some chamber's hormonal feedback loop or ritualized trial. It was real. It was theirs. They emerged from the ridge mouth high above a sunken ravine, the temple sealed behind a layer of stone and twisted vines that would fool anyone into thinking it was just another collapsed cave. Wind swept across the rock face, and for a moment neither of them spoke. They just stood there, two survivors of something older than memory, breathing in the world as if, for the first time, Lillian stepped forward until the sun hit her face, her fur still damp with the aftermath of that long descent shimmered under the light. Her tattoos had faded to faint outlines, no longer pulsing, no longer reacting. She moved like someone who had left something monstrous behind but hadn't run from it. Her chest rose and fell, slow and steady, like every breath grounded her. In her new self. Benson walked beside her, silent. Not because there wasn't anything to say, but because everything that had needed saying had already been etched into the stone beneath that temple. Every restraint, every choice, every battle fought in stillness had carved something permanent between them. They followed the ridge for hours. Neither knew exactly where they were, but Lillian led with confidence, following scent trails and broken route lines like an ancient map only she could read. Her instincts were no longer distorted by ritual heat. They were sharp now, clean, alive. And when they finally descended into a low valley where fresh water glistened and trees formed a natural canopy, Benson knew this was the place not to hide to. Begin. They set up camp with practiced silence, like two people who had nothing to prove to each other anymore. Benson used broken drone parts and the last of his multi-tools to build a frame. Lillian hunted small game with nothing but her hands and teeth. They moved in rhythm now, no orders, no roles. Just motion. Just trust. 3 nights passed. On the 4th, it rained. Not violently, just a steady, cool rain that softened the air and muffled the sounds of the forest. They sat beneath their makeshift shelter, wrapped in woven bark and old tarp, eating dried root and smoked meat in silence. Outside, lightning flickered behind distant clouds. The world moved around them without urgency. Then, without warning, Lillian stood. She walked out into the rain barefoot, arms loose at her sides. Her head tilted back, eyes shut as water ran down her face, soaked her fur, matted the curls of her mane. Benson watched from the doorway, quiet, still, reverent. After a moment, she turned to him. Do you know what the old rites said about rain after a cycle? She asked. He shook his head. They said it meant the ancestors had forgiven you. That your heat was no longer cursed, but cleansed. Benson stepped into the rain. Do you believe that? She gave a faint smile. I don't believe in shame anymore. Just choices. They stood in the rain together, water pouring off their bodies, pooling around their feet, and somewhere beneath that silence, something shifted again. Not heat, not biology. Belonging. Lillian reached to her belt and slowly pulled free the broken mating cuffs she'd once worn in defiance. They were dull now, useless. No longer a symbol of ownership or control. She placed them in his hands. Burn them, she said softly. Benson didn't ask why. He built the fire, and when the cuffs twisted, in the flame, warping, cracking, curling into themselves until nothing was left but ash. Neither of them flinched. They watched something ancient die. And something new begin. Days passed. Then weeks. The camp became a structure. The structure became a home. One night, Lillian returned from a perimeter hunt with a scrap of metal in her hand, old, rusted, but still bearing the faded insignia of the outpost. She set it on the table beside him. This was from the old ranger station, she said. Found it near the dry creek bed. He looked at it for a long time, then picked it up and placed it beside the firelight. They'll think we're dead, he said eventually. Maybe we are, she said. The versions of us that walked into that temple didn't walk back out. Benson turned to her. You think they'll ever come looking? She stepped closer, pressed her forehead to his. Not if we don't ask them to. He smiled. Then let them wonder. She kissed him. Not because the cycle demanded it. Not because the air smelled. Right. Not because her biology screamed. But because she wanted to. And when they curled into one another under the stars that night, there was no ritual, no instinct. No trial left to pass. They had already passed it all. They had chosen each other without pressure. Without programming. Without fear. And that made their bond the rarest kind of real. In the morning, they carved a post from a fallen branch, set it at the edge of the clearing, and painted it with two symbols, one from her tribe and one from the old human scouting corps. No message. No names. Just two shapes joined. They didn't need anyone to know what it meant. They already did.